Good evening, you're watching Primetime Debate. I'm Tamanna. Simultaneous polls or holding elections for centre and state together is an idea mooted strongly by Prime Minister Modi and recently President Ramnath Kovind. But is it feasible? A leading newspaper has quoted Election Commission sources today saying that at least 5 major changes will have to be made to the Constitution to enable simultaneous polls. Opposition parties, meanwhile, have expressed reservations about the idea. But what are the pros and cons for simultaneous polls? And what could be the political repercussions? To speak on this, I'm joined today by Tathagata Satpathy, Member of Parliament from the Biju Janata Dal, R. Jagannathan, Editorial Director of Swaraj, and SY Quraishi, former Chief Election Commissioner, also joins us on the phone line. Welcome to all of you on the show. I'm keen to speak first with Mr. Quraishi as former CEC. What is your view on simultaneous polls and the way it's being pushed right now? Do you think there is a possibility or a feasibility of this plan?
You know, from the point of view of the Election Commission of India, this is the easiest thing and nicest thing to happen because, voter is the same, polling station is the same, polling staff is the same, and security is the same. If a voter enters the polling station, whether he votes for one election or 2 or 3, it is the same thing. So therefore, the convenience is enormous for the Election Commission. The only problem will be we need the double the number of machines. If it is 2 elections simultaneous and 4 times the machine for local body elections are also included. But except for that, there is a convenience. But as the Election Commission has said, then it requires a political consensus. And I'm happy that Prime Minister is not trusting it on people. He is demanding and is trying for a consensus. And that will not be easy to come, but that is very important.
There is also one question that the EC has raised in the past as well, which is about in terms of feasibility and mobilizing that many security forces. Mr. Quraishi, you have elections in large states like Uttar Pradesh in several phases. Only because it is difficult to have one vote for an entire state on one day. How would that be possible if you try and get the whole country to vote together?
No. It's multi-phase election has nothing to do with the concept of simultaneous election. Simultaneous only means that Lok Sabha, Vidhan Sabha and Panchayat election should happen together. If all are happening in several phases, so be it, because this is one-off election, one time, except it is being held in phases because of the security reasons. Loss of life is the most sacred thing that we have to be worried about. Otherwise, the Election Commission will be happy to do it on one day, which will be ideal for many other reasons, especially in this age of social media. Why do we do it in phases? Because every political party insists that we bring in paramilitary forces. And for paramilitary forces being limited, they have to be withdrawn from Maoist areas, from the border, from here and there.
See my point, sir. If we need paramilitary forces and we cannot do it in one day for one state, how can we do it for the entire country?
No. One election simultaneous, as I said, that you have to make exactly the same arrangement, whether it is a Lok Sabha poll or Vidhan Sabha poll. So therefore, instead of making the same arrangement repeatedly, in one arrangement, if a person comes and votes for 2 elections or 3, he doesn't have any additional security requirement at all. The same security, same bandobast has to be identical. One bandobast is more enough for all 3. Yeah.
Please stay on with us. I want to get R. Jagannathan into this conversation. Mr. Jagannathan, now what the Election Commission seems to be saying, as per the Times of India article today, is that you would have to make major amendments to the Constitution, and at one point they say you will have to create a system where while voting for a no confidence motion for the current government, in case that government gets dissolved, you will also have to have a confidence motion for the next one. Wouldn't that be a subversion of the idea of democracy?
Yeah, not really, because what happens is that, first of all, of course, you have to do it with all these constitutional amendments. Without that, you cannot have simultaneous polls. The constitutional amendments are needed because if you're holding, say, simultaneous elections either once in 5 years or more, probably once in 2.5 years, where one bunch of states goes in one lot and another bunch after 2.5 years. The main problem you need to tackle is the fact that, say, a government may lose confidence after a few months, let's say, due to political developments. So in this case, the legislature has not lost the mandate of the people. It is only the leader who has lost. So if you have a situation like that, basically what you need to do is you need to propose an alternate leader, because the previous leader has lost the confidence of the assembly. So that is the provision you need to change in the constitution. And once you do that, it is not a rejection of the mandate, because the whole every single MLA or MP has got elected for 5 years. So it's not that their mandate is being rejected. It is just that it has not been able to coalesce around a single leader. So you can, if you create a provision whereby if you are going to reject one CM or PM candidate by a no trust, you should say who is the alternative. Now, it's a slight tweak of the democratic process. It is not a repudiation of it.
What is your point of view, Mr. Satpathy? Because a lot of parties, especially regional parties, are very uncomfortable with the idea of simultaneous polls. Can you explain why, sir?
I am very lucky because my leader, Naveen Patnaik ji, he dissolved the assembly a year before the scheduled elections in 2004. It was due for elections in 2005 March. He wanted to sync it with the parliament election, so he did it in 2004. That India Shining election where the BJP, the NDA lost in Delhi, and we won in Orissa with a thumping majority. That is our good luck, and since then we have been synchronized with parliament elections. So again, our elections are due, assembly elections are due in 2009. That's one part of the story. The other part of the story is who is batting for simultaneous elections. It's a bunch of bureaucrats, whether in the EC or outside. You see, what they don't understand is democracy is not something that you can have in your statute books. If they knew history, and if they knew what had happened in 1999 when Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government collapsed after 13 and a half months, they would realize that everything cannot be in the statute books. When the general elections took place first time in the mid-50s in India, all the states and parliament went to the polls together. But over a period of time, which is not very long in the history of a nation, over 50, 60 years, we saw that multiple assemblies collapsed, they caved in, parties broke up. It is very wrong. People who are inexperienced will say that you bring in one bunch of politicians, you move the other, the assembly is still alive. That is not how things work. What is the problem then? The problem is one gentleman thinks in today's circumstances that he is the sole person to whom people will look up to and vote for the party. Now, you can have a donkey, he thinks, you can have a donkey standing from his party, but if he goes in campaigns, that donkey will also win. My point is, why are they bothered about simultaneous elections? If you don't have paramilitary forces, it's not political parties who want it. It is also the government, the system, the EC which wants paramilitary forces.
I'm sorry, Mr. Satpathy, I would urge you to speak. I would urge you to speak your mind, because it is not just bureaucrats. The Prime Minister of the country has made a pitch for it. It is in the BJP's manifesto. They clearly do want simultaneous polls. So no point, beating around the bush on that. With all due respect, sir.
No, I am agreeing with you that it is the Prime Minister, it is his sole, this individual's problem. Otherwise, no other Prime Minister has complained, because other Prime Ministers do not quit work to go and campaign in their home state for 1.5 months. The Parliament session was pushed back. The Central Secretariat virtually took no decisions over that 1 month period. So it is one individual's problem. It is not the nation's problem. The nation is progressing well, and I would say in a very affirmative manner in the course of maturing democracy. So democracy cannot be dictated, cannot be contained within your statute books. People change their opinions. Sometimes elected representatives change their opinions. Sometimes they simply die. Like last 2 days, we have had the parliament not working today and even on Friday. Why? Because two Lok Sabha MPs died. It was a natural death. So things like that happen. And death is not something in my hands. Even I could be dying tomorrow. So what I'm trying to say is that for an individual's comfort, is it okay to sacrifice everything that the nation has done over the last 75 years and
Okay.
has matured? Or do we take it back and spend billions again to satisfy this one person? That's a call the nation has to take.
Let me take that to
just
Mr.
an individual.
Jagannathan. Let me take that to Mr. Jagannathan, and in the midst of this, we wish you the very best of health and a very long life, Mr. Satpathy. But I get the point that you're making. Just those 2 points, Mr. Jagannathan, that seats will be vacated for whatever reason. There could be changes in parties. We've seen that at the state and the central level. If that government no longer has the majority that it had on day one, what are you going to do for the remainder of the term? Will there be a governor's rule or a president's rule which would then defeat the purpose?
No, I don't think so. I think that is why it's being suggested that you have to choose an alternative leader of the House when one loses the confidence. So at the most, that situation will have to continue for about 2.5 years if we have two phases of simultaneous elections. So people are looking at various options, but I don't agree with Mr. Satpathy that this is the result of one man's this thing. I don't think it is his whim. He wants a consensus, and if there is no consensus, it will not happen in any case. And let's not presume that democracy, the whole point of changing the constitution repeatedly, we have had 140 amendments moved, 100 of them have been thing. So if you think constitution is something that is inalterable, unalterable, then I think we might as well stop being a democracy. Constitutions are always amended in order to make democracy function better. And this business of having 5 or 10 major elections every year for all 5-year term is actually proving a drag on governance. And it is proving a drag on governance not only at the center, but also at the state. Because every time some election or the other keeps coming somewhere or the other, if the whole process stops, entire bureaucracies are dislocated.
But why should it?
Then
Why should it? Just a quick counter. Why should it? Is it imperative that the entire central government has to go and poll and campaign for every election? It need not be the case, Mr. Jagannathan.
Actually, there are 2 reasons for it. Sorry, you want me to ask me?
Yes, that's for you.
Yeah, actually there are 2 reasons for it, because our constitution itself is a muddled up affair. You have things in the concurrent list which state can legislate, center can legislate. So all issues get mixed up, whether it is center or state or panchayat. So I think till you separate the things, once you separate it all, that center can only do this, state can only do this, and local bodies can only do this, and there is no overlap, then you can have any elections anytime, because one issue will not get confused with the other. Here the problem is every small panchayat election you say, oh, PM has lost confidence. I mean, why? I mean, that's what opposition will say. And reverse also happen. When you win a Lok Sabha election, poor Nitish Kumar has to resign because there is no reason why he did not lose his mandate. It was just the Lok Sabha mandate that was different. But he had to resign, and people said he lost his moral authority.
No one held a gun to his head.
If you have this kind of situation,
that was politics at another level. But anyway, we won't get into that. No one forced Nitish Kumar to resign.
That's what people demand.
He chose to. People demand resignations every second day, sir.
People demand it in any case.
People demand. Anyway, I'm going to get Mr. SY Quraishi back into this conversation on that one particular point, Mr. Quraishi. What happens when a government loses its mandate in the middle of its term? And that has happened several times in Indian political history. Then what happens for the remainder of the term?
That is exactly the question. But before I go into detail into that, I entirely disagree with Mr. Satpathy when he said it is the bureaucracy which wants it. Where has bureaucracy come in this? Bureaucracy has no word, no say in this. It is entirely political. And his other point that it is one man, obviously it is the Prime Minister who is pushing it. And Election Commission's response is only if there is consensus, they will do it. They have only stated a fact that logistically it is no problem for them, and they have only explained that. To say that bureaucracy wants it for its convenience is a wrong allegation and not acceptable at all.
Let me before you come to your second point, let me get Mr. Satpathy to respond to that. Mr. Satpathy, it's clearly a political move, a political demand as well. The Election Commission was called on to check feasibility.
Will I be able to narrate a small little thing before you ask me the question? See, no matter who is administering this country, it is the bureaucracy which is the constant ruler. Let's be very honest about it. Secondly, there was one gentleman who was CEC for a certain time. He was from the Tamil Nadu cadre, and he made himself look holier than thou, and he made sub-collectors and collectors of a district the supreme lords during that election time. And the observers who used to go to different constituencies were IAS or IRS or IPS officers. They were treated like gods, from their chicken to mutton to shirts to trousers, everything the local officials had to bring to them. You won't believe what a heyday the bureaucracy has when elections are in progress. Otherwise also, to say that the bureaucracy does not want it is wrong. I know how bureaucracy behaves during elections as if they are the holiest of holy, and all politicians are
Mr. Quraishi wants to come in because at the end of the day, Parliament has to
Yes.
vote. There has to be a two-third majority to change the constitution.
Yes.
Whether
Yes.
the bureaucracy wants it or not is honestly not
Tamanna.
moved to the conversation. Yes, Mr. Quraishi.
Tamanna, Mr. Satpathy is contradicting himself. If bureaucracy becomes God,
How?
it will like to remain God, and repeated elections will help it to remain God for longer periods. Therefore, on the one hand, he says the bureaucracy wants simultaneous elections so that it becomes irrelevant for 5 years. On the other hand, it becomes God every time election is announced. I don't know what exactly he's saying. And his focus on bureaucracy.
That piecemeal.
Okay, let us come to the key question which you were about to answer, Mr. Quraishi, which is what happens if a government loses majority in the middle of its term. It's happened before. It can happen again. Then what?
Yes, that is the key question, and for which the parliamentary committee came out with a suggestion that instead of one election in 5 years, let us have 2 elections in 5 years, so that instead of a government falling in the middle of the term, waiting for 4.5 years or 5 years, they can come to election in 2.5 years. And that is what we feel will be very difficult to achieve consensus on. That is exactly the point. The government will keep on falling.
Okay, let's talk about the big point that we haven't touched upon yet. And I'm going to start with Mr. Jagannathan on this. Is one concern politically also this, Mr. Jagannathan, that if you have simultaneous polls in state and centre, then whichever party is in power in the centre will have some sort of an added advantage. That issues may get muddled up, the message may get muddled up, and voters may tend to vote for the big national parties, leaving the regional parties at a disadvantage.
Actually, let's not assume that the current situation where there is one party with a complete majority on its own will continue forever. We could well go into the coalition era. So there is nothing to stop a bunch of regional parties and national parties to create a national coalition and challenge whoever is in power in Delhi. And in any case, the issue is not about whether one party, see, at this point, you do have a prime minister who is larger than life. But at other points, you may not have that, So I think let's not presume that Mr. Modi is the template on the basis of which we have to decide whether simultaneous elections good or not. He just happens to be there. And let's not forget that without a consensus, this won't happen. Most probably, it will not happen during the term of this Lok Sabha. It will have to be attempted in the next Lok Sabha where parties build a larger consensus. And if there is a different party in power, who knows, they may also have the same interest in doing so. So I think we should not assume that any party has a permanent advantage in this. I don't think our history proves that even the strongest of parties have repeatedly floundered in the next election. I mean, we thought Vajpayee will win in 2004. Did he win? He didn't. He had a larger than life image. So we cannot assume any such thing that one party will continue to dominate forever. And that is not the argument you need to give when you're talking about simultaneous elections. You should look at other things, like the most important issue is only about governments falling in the middle, and that's the issue we need to tackle.
Absolutely, and to that also a point that comes to mind, that if a government loses its majority, why should voters deal with that government for even 2.5 years, if not 4.5 years? But just last point from you, Mr. Satpathy, your party is perhaps a prime example of how simultaneous elections can work to preserve democracy. You yourself talked about how, even during the Modi wave, your Biju Janata Dal has prevailed in Odisha. So doesn't that go to prove the point that simultaneous poll may not impact the voters' choice in that sense?
It may not, but I believe politics has to be free-flowing. Politics cannot be, especially in a democracy. In a democracy, in a democratic setup, you cannot contain anything. It has to be free-flowing. It has to be natural. People always, like in school, you have a midterm exam also. You have every 3 months exams also.
Yes.
A politician in a democracy should be giving exams every so often.
Okay.
We should be judged by the people who have voted us to power. Power is not permanent. I'm not a permanent MP. Similarly, a prime minister should not consider himself or herself permanent. Even someone like Indira Gandhi is gone also today.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is, it has to be, democracy has to be free-flowing. Nobody should be able to put it in a box. That's all I'm saying.
All right. We'll have to end it there. Thank you so much, SY Quraishi, Jagannathan and Tathagata Satpathy, for speaking with us this evening. Those were the broad pros and cons of simultaneous elections. But of course, it is a debate that has only just begun. Thank you so much for joining us. And for more on that story and the other top news of the day, please go to BloombergQuint.com.